Hi, I wanted to invite you to the beautiful world of antiques, jewelry, design, art, furnitures, everything. It's humongous and I love it, and there is always more to learn. I grew up in this world. So at the age of 7, my parents started buying jewelry and some silver, some art crafts, some different things. We were living in Argentina at that time, and my mom discovered that the price of gold, so the gram, was less in Argentina than it was in Sweden. So she started exploring that, and then they started buying a little bit. It wasn't like huge business. They just started buying. At some point, they started selling. There was a little bit of a crisis in Argentina. People and families needed to move home to Europe, for example, and they helped them with sales. We did a lot of garage sales and helped them with that. Well, that was a long story. 5 years, they were starting to buy and also starting to sell. After that, we moved to Germany. And they started a real business where they were going on antique fairs and selling a lot. Kids, me and my brother, coming along on these long weekends that we didn't always like. We were in different cities. We didn't know anybody. But I do remember wandering around the streets a little bit, having fun, and also sometimes boring. When I started growing up, I learned a lot about the dealing. I got to know so many dealers as well, and they were very chatty, so I'm really happy about that. But then, when I also started into the business, I was about 20 when I started full on, they were already purchasing things from auction houses. At that time, there was hardly anything online, so you needed to get a catalog and read through the catalog, then also call the auction house and then get a lot of information from them. And it also depended how you asked. Sometimes you could get some extra photos. It wasn't super easy always, but there were some auctions that also took photos and sent them to us. But this is prior to the internet that is so much more easy now. It goes very quickly. It is also very dynamic and has other challenges. Growing into this business of the auction world, where we're buying maybe for 10, 15, 20 years, and I was helping them. I was also on the other part where I was going out to the auction houses live, because we did a lot of bidding, not online, on telephone or written bids, because there's written bids, you send them in, or you can do online bidding then with a telephone. Nowadays, there's also the possibility sometimes to do online bidding. You can really be there and bid online. And then there's also live bidding in the auction house. So I sometimes flew to the auction houses to bid. And sometimes we had so-called runners. So I educated people to bid for us. It's a long, extremely experience in this world of auctions. And then when I was in Sweden studying art history, and after that, when I was working with different things, I got very curious of the other side. So I've been on the side, so many different auction houses around all Europe, because we were mostly buying in Europe. So Europe is a big auction world and a small one. And then I got so curious, how's it on the other side? How are they thinking? How is the strategy? So I got super curious and I applied to a job that came up. It's to be an evaluator on an auction house here in Sweden, in Helsingborg. That's why I moved to the city, by the way. I was living in Malmö at a little short while in Lund, and then I moved on to Helsingborg due to a job offer. So I was at an auction house called Laurits.com. It still exists. And I worked there for a while until I discovered some not so good things. And I discovered a bit of cheating, a bit of lying, and they wanted me to put my name on things that were not correct. So there is a bigger story on that, because I revealed things and the owners of that franchise had to leave. Because in this world, there's some no's, you're not allowed to do. And there's really rules and regulation on that. And then there's a lot of things behind the scenes that you might want to know or want to be aware of. And going to auction houses, asking lots of questions is really, really great. Getting to know them, starting to buy, especially if you want to buy a little bit more things, there's things to be aware of. So throughout the years I've been working with them, I'm attentive on quite a lot of points, and I start asking them. And then I often visit the auctions house as well, because I want to get to know the people. This is when you do want to do a lot more business with them. As me as a dealer, I do. And I start cultivating also a good relationship with them. You can, as a buyer, be very aware of things, and it works out really, really great. What I want to do, and that's why I'm also inviting you to a call, is going deeper into this area. So you know what to look out for, to be aware of. What are the hidden things that you might not know? What are things that you want to be reading before you bid, so you know what it's going to cost you? Because there is some cost involved in buying. The same thing, you twist it around if you want to be the seller. This is something that happens to most people. They want to sell something. Mostly I get the questions when I go to homes to evaluate. It's that you inherited something that you don't want to keep anymore, or something else. You want to change your decoration at home. I have been asked a lot of times to come in and evaluate things, especially here in Scandinavia. I still do it. It depends on what you're looking at. So in bigger things, sometimes I do travel to the place. Sometimes we do it online. It's very different. As I have a lot of like the knowledge I have, which auction houses are good for what, that helps me also. If you have something that's really worth, especially higher amounts, a huge amount, then I really can guide you where will you get the best price, because it does differ a lot. Even if the auction houses are online, even if they all cover the whole world, they say, it's very different. And it's very interesting also in what country you're selling things. But if you have things that are worth a couple €1,000, you're not gonna make a big change if you jump countries. Sometimes yes, and sometimes no. So there's a side of the seller as well. You want to know what to be aware of, how to even talk to them, how to check out, because there's cost for you selling as well. And sometimes it's better to sell direct to a client, less than selling through auction house. You're going to get it depends, 15 to 20% less from what you sold, for example. But in the higher amounts, if you go over, this is where it depends on every auction house. They all have their different rules and regulations. They have like, one that I work with, they have an 18.75%, but up to a certain amount. And then the percentage goes down, the higher amount it is what they evaluate your piece to be at. And in some places, you're also allowed to make a limit on your price. That means a limit to the least amount it will be selling for. So if you put in there to an auction a beautiful jewelry or a mirror or anything like that, and it has an evaluation of €500 or something like that, but you have no minimum, it could go for €100 if nobody finds it or wants it. And those are things to watch out. In things that are quite low in price, often they don't even want to put a minimum or even have the regulation or the rule. They will not put a minimum. I worked in one of those auction houses. Sometimes that's good and sometimes that's not good. So ups and downs you want to be aware of. That's why I'm also wanting to do a call or calls about this area. So if you start working with auction houses, for me it's like start buying or selling. You don't even have to go professional, but I can recommend everybody to look out for auction houses. And I'm 100% sure there's somewhere in your radius where you live, most likely. I might fail in this, but at least in the bigger cities in the country, there are auction houses. If you ever can go to them when they have a showing, that's a pre-showing before they go and bid, before the auction, go there. You can touch the things, you can talk to the people working there, you can get a lot of information. This is how I educate myself a lot, especially in new areas. I go and check things out. I do also go to museums, but as there's usually nobody I can interrogate about the quality, price, and all that. I go a lot to auctions and antique fairs, and especially high-end, because I want to learn from very high-end. Doesn't mean I buy there, but you will also educate yourself. You're knowing your awareness and all that thing, and it takes time. I can't say you will know everything without a week or a month. I don't know, but when you start, and you'll have more information, you'll have more knowledge. You will also educate yourself that it will be easier to have an awareness when something shows up. And knowing also a little bit more how to ask the questions and what questions are really relevant to ask. That is the thing. A lot of people jump in and think they know, or they get so inspired, and a lot do not buy the best things because they look at the photo and then it doesn't look so good when he comes home. Check out if your auction house is allowed to do a return. And some countries, when you buy online, you're allowed to have a 2-week return on things, and a lot of countries you don't. So there's so much information. And I'd love to cover this so you have a start, almost like a more smooth start. I mean, we got to learn so much. And from that time, we were also not doing the transportation on our own. So we were basically we're booking people to pick things up and drive them to Germany. There was ups and downs with that too. And there is and then you want to know if that's insured or not. So it's an intrigue. For me, it's one of the most intriguing worlds there is, because there's nothing the same, but you will meet people that you can start trusting or trust what they deliver, because they will be deliver very similar thing depending on how they portrait themselves and how keen they are to honesty. It's a world with a lot of people that are not very honest. It's not necessarily a problem, but the thing is, you want to be aware of it. That's the thing I see. There's a lot of shady business too. I've been in the antique world with antiques fairs and all that, and I've been selling a lot of copies and things like that. And that we want to avoid. We want to avoid a lot of that. So let's start with a call. Lots of information for you guys, and to dig deep, and for all your information as well. And be interested. There's so many possibilities to make really, really good purchases on auction houses, and especially around where you live, in your country, in maybe in your city or in the bigger city you live next to. Most people will never go there. I live in a country that has a lot of exposure when it comes to auction houses. People go easy to auction houses. There's been hundreds of years without had auctions here in Scandinavia. So there is a cultural thing as well. But what I see is a lot of people never going to an auction house, so never opening the door to a possibility. When you do open the door to a possibility, you'll find things that you mightn't even know that you were interested of, or you'll find furniture or design things. You're like, oh my God, and the prices might vary so much that you're gonna make so many awesome purchases that will also be much better than if you go to a shop or antique store. So, hey, let's open this door of possibilities. Welcome.